Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to Knowledge Management in the Contact Centre. This webinar is part of the Contact Centre Optimisation series brought to you by Amtel Communications. This is in partnership with CCiNZ. We've got a fantastic agenda for you today that we hope you'll enjoy. But before we start, I'd like to go over just a few little housekeeping items. I'm sure all participants are in the listen-only mode anyway, but that's one of the only rules we have, although we do encourage questions. And based on that, we do hope you have some questions, and if you do, then please use the question panel in the dashboard on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll have the opportunity to go through these in a Q&A session at the end of this webinar, and hopefully have enough time to do that for you. After the presentation, we'll send you a link to download a copy of the slides. These contain contact details for myself, Micah and Shona, the two presenters today, and please feel free to contact us with any questions that you may have. Okay, my screen is not, unfortunately, let me show you the next slide. But anyway, let's just go through this. So today's agenda. My name is Ian McLean, and I'm the Sales Manager here at Amtel and your host for today. We have Micah Joel presenting first. Micah is a Principal Engineer at Salesforce.com. Now, Micah has worked in the customer service software business for more than a decade. He's now with Salesforce.com, and his role is to advise customers on how to design and deliver successful customer service initiatives. Following on from Micah, we have Shona McDonald, Customer Care Centre Manager from Courier Post here in Auckland. Shona is not only a practitioner, but is also keen to support the industry through her involvement on the committee of CCiNZ. As a user of knowledge management systems, Shona will bring us a user's perspective to today's webinar. Okay, so before we have Micah and Shona present, we'd like to open with an interactive poll just to get you thinking a bit. So, the poll we have for you today, which I'm not seeing unfortunately. Mel, is that up?
Yeah, it's up. It's up here. That's fine.
It is? Okay, thanks for that, Mel. Okay, so the poll we have today, I'm for some reason not viewing it, unfortunately. So the question we have today is, do you currently use a knowledge management system in your contact centre? If you could please just have a quick little think about that and give us your yes or no answer. And Micah, while these results are being compiled, what are your predictions on this poll?
Thanks. I'm sorry I was on mute. I'm not certain. I'm going to predict about 50-50, but we'll see what the numbers bear out.
Okay, all right. Well, the votes are still coming in. We've got around 90% of the participants have voted, so that's a pretty good success rate. What we're showing here is 43% say yes, 57% say no. So, look, that's pretty close, Micah. Not too far from the mark itself. So I guess there's opportunity there for those who don't have the knowledge management system in place or using it, we don't understand what it can do for them to consider it seriously as they move forward. So with that, what I'd like to do now is pass you over to Micah Joel. And Micah, I'll get you to run through your presentation.
Excellent, thank you. Momentarily I'll share my screen here and I'll get started. So as Ian said, my name is Micah Joel, and I am a Principal Sales Engineer over at Salesforce.com. So I've been working in the industry a couple of years. And I primarily work in the service space, so with folks who are deploying call centers and deploying knowledge management tools. Are you folks able to see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen. No problem at all.
Excellent. Okay. Today what I thought I'd talk about is just 3 topics. For those of you who don't have a knowledge management system, I'll talk a little bit about the types of organizations that need a knowledge management system. And then I thought I'd talk a little bit about how to assess knowledge management products, so introducing some concepts around search and taxonomy and some of the features that you'll typically see in knowledge management products, and some of my experiences with those features, which ones are maybe important depending on the types of requirements you have, and which ones you may not have to worry about so much as you're assessing various tools. And then I'll talk a little bit about the kinds of things you really want to think about when you're deploying knowledge management and the types of questions you should be asking that are beyond simply what software you choose, but have much more to do with the types of processes and people who are involved in your organization. So let me start off just a little bit about types of organizations need knowledge management. So the good news is this: over the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years, knowledge management has gone from being something that's quite difficult and expensive to do and typically only available to larger organizations to something that's a lot more accessible to smaller organizations. It used to be you had to set up significant hardware and do a great deal of configuration and tuning to get a knowledge management solution in place. But these days there's a number of providers, not unlike my company Salesforce, that provide it on demand. And so you don't have to set all that up. You can basically switch it on and start putting in knowledge articles right away. That's good and bad. It's bad because there's some organizations that think that knowledge may be the solution to all their ills, and I think over the years I've found that there's a couple of scenarios where knowledge management is best. There's still some investment required. There's an investment of time and people and effort to make a successful knowledge management solution. But in the cases where there's an economic benefit to the organization, that's definitely worth the trouble. And those cases are the ones you see here. So in call centers that particularly have recurring generic questions. Financial services has 2 types of questions commonly. One is generic questions around how do I do this and how do I do that, and the other is questions specifically about accounts. What's my balance? What's my interest rate, et cetera, et cetera. That's very specific to an individual. So for generic questions, knowledge management makes a lot of sense. For much more specific account-specific questions, knowledge management isn't a great fit because it's designed generally to be something much broader based. But if you have a combination of both, it can be very effective. The same is true with agent turnover. If there's organizations that have high agent turnover or just lots of agents and the natural turnover rate is meaningful, knowledge management can be a very powerful way to get those agents up to speed quickly and to make sure that they're consistent. And that's a big piece of it as well, the consistency across all of those agents rather than those who've been there longer having much more access and understanding of the source information. And that also addresses the idea of a short training window. You obviously want to spend as little time as possible training agents up, but you nevertheless have to train them well enough to be able to do their job. And a knowledge management solution can help bring people up to speed by giving them access to questions or to answers to commonly asked questions, but also answers to more thorny questions that they may not have experienced before. Another area where knowledge management can be very powerful for you is on a public website or in portals. So this is where I would say economics is helpful, where you're handling a large number of customers. Even if you're a small company, you may have a large customer base. So being able to provide answers through self-service so that customers get their answer, and more importantly in some cases to deflect those questions and cases from reaching you, because you may not have a very large support organization. So this is a great way to leverage the information and knowledge you have internally so that people can get their own answers and not have to engage your relatively precious resources. You can also use knowledge management to provide documents and rich media. So knowledge isn't just about what we'd say articles, little bits of text that answer questions like an FAQ, but knowledge can actually be quite rich and can allow you to share documents like documentation or user guides or best practices, and rich media like videos and images, of course, to customers who may want to access them. And the value of the knowledge management solution doing this is commonly knowledge management solutions have a search capability that allows your customers to find what they're looking for very quickly versus having to browse through an endless chain of web pages in order to find an answer. And then the last use case I'll talk about today is if you're an organization that has a relatively large number of new employees, you're growing quickly, and if you have fairly complex internal processes, be they HR processes, onboarding and so forth, setting up your superannuation or your health plan or whatever it might be, but also if you're an organization that just has a lot of layers or a lot of instituted processes that people need to understand, IT processes or business processes around, say, even sales approval, getting discount approval from people further up the chain. So those kinds of things knowledge management can be very useful for. All right, let's talk a little bit about the types of things that you'd be looking at in a knowledge management solution. So we're going to look at a couple of areas here. The first area is creation and workflow. Where does the knowledge come from, and how is it handled once you have it? So traditionally, most people imagine knowledge management as this tool that you have somebody who sits down and types in an article, and then somebody who edits that article, and then someone who publishes that article, and it's sort of the origination of knowledge is a very formal process. But there's a lot of different ways to capture knowledge and to develop that knowledge base that don't simply involve someone sitting down and setting their mind to it. And the first I'd call inflow capture, which is knowledge that's gathered during the process. So it may be that I'm creating a case, and in creating a case for a customer, there are things I learn that become useful in a knowledge article. And so some knowledge tools will actually take cases and essentially turn them into knowledge articles. Or we'll take the contents of a case, the write-up of a case, and we'll turn that into a knowledge article and make it searchable for other folks. So it's knowledge that's being created along the way. A prompted capture is where, let's say, an agent is asked to create a knowledge article. So I'm an agent, I'm taking a call, and I don't find my answer in the existing knowledge base, and so I note that, and somewhere during this process, probably at the end during wrap-up, I'm prompted with, hey, if you didn't find what you're looking for, what should be here? What is missing? Or did you find an alternative solution to this case, in which case, please enter it so that we can turn this into a piece of knowledge. So those are the more traditional routes, but there's also in the last couple of years been the development of things like collaborative knowledge, where conversations are being had in various forms. So there's lots of different tools that do this. Facebook is a great example of somewhere that conversations occur, but you may have an internal tool. Salesforce has a tool called Chatter that's available to customers as well. Some folks use forums and other tools where conversations are already occurring, and it's powerful to be able to take those conversations. Someone asked a question, someone provided an answer from inside the organization, and be able to turn those into knowledge articles. And then lastly, community knowledge. So customers are talking to each other as well. They're talking on forums, and they're talking on discussion boards, and to be able to take knowledge from customer interactions, either between you and customers or between customers, and turn those into knowledge articles as well. So these are all sources, and these are all things as you're looking at products, you should see, you should look for the product's ability to create knowledge from all of these sources. In terms of what you do once you have that knowledge in there, the system should have well-defined roles to govern the knowledge process. It should be able to, you should be able to assign people the ability to edit articles or create articles, but not publish them. You should be able to have a gatekeeper who's the person who determines whether an article is appropriate for internal consumption or external consumption. So you should be able to set up roles like that. You should also allow, on the flip side of that, organization-wide access. There should be a way for people who are not just knowledge authors, who are not just licensed knowledge authors, to contribute to the knowledge process, to get feedback on a particular article from a subject matter expert, or to originate either by asking a question or providing an answer. So a knowledge tool should be able to accommodate a wider range of people in the organization than just the people designated as knowledge authors. You should be able to do auto-publication and archiving, and what that means is the ability to create a series of articles and then publish them on a certain date, say for a particular release or a particular launch, and then also to be able to identify when those articles are considered no longer fresh or at least in need of review, and to be able to archive those so they can go back into the beginning of the knowledge process, be evaluated, be updated as necessary, and then re-released. And lastly, if you're handling multiple languages, you should definitely assess the multi-language capability. And it's not enough just to find out whether or not that product can handle multiple languages. It's really more about what the process is around managing related articles in multiple languages. So if I have an article in English and I need to translate it into French or Japanese, how do I know when I make the change in the English article that it also affects these two articles? And how do I keep that linkage going? And then how do I do things like export that information for a translation house, et cetera, et cetera? So those are the types of things you'll want to think about when you're assessing the creation and workflow capabilities of a tool. From a delivery perspective, there's a couple of different things you should look for as well. And the question here is, how will the knowledge be used? How exactly will it be used? And you need to think about the audiences and also the types of knowledge that you're going to be providing them. But some of the areas you should look at are things like in-context knowledge. I am on your website looking at a particular product page. If I ask a question, odds are pretty good that I'm asking a question about this product or family of products. So to be able to provide me, if I type something into the search that you provide on that page to find an answer, odds are pretty good that the results coming back should be aware that I was on a page for product X. So in-context capabilities are important. Role-based views. So the idea that an individual inside the organization can look at the same article as an individual outside the organization, but have access to different, I would say different fields or different pieces of information in that. So an internal user might have internal notes or comments that you really don't want to share with the customers, but are very important if a customer calls in and speaks to a CSR. And from the customer side, there may be different types of customers. There may be partners who are coming in through a portal and who need additional information. There might be advanced customers. There might be administrator customers versus end user customers. And so being able to show, instead of having separate articles for all those audiences, being able to show each audience exactly what it needs out of the same article. It should be aware of customers, and this is particularly true internally, but even if your customer is logged into a portal, if I've only purchased, or if for example, at a bank, if I'm only a consumer user, I don't need articles about all of your business products at that moment. What I need is everything that relates to me being a consumer. And because if this is linked to your CRM system, you can pass that information in, you should be able to provide them with the appropriate answers from the appropriate area. So understanding, using the data you have about a customer, that knowledge tool should be able to present back results that are likely to match what the customer wants versus just everything in the database. It should be multi-channel, as I mentioned, being able to serve all channels from one spot, employees, but partners through portals and customers, and even out to your public website. So again, you're managing all of your knowledge in one spot. Multi-language, again, to handle global users. The considerations externally are essentially how does that render for those users? How does it know that they're from a particular region? How do you make that decision? Does the user specify what language they want to read these in, or can they specify multiple languages? And lastly, multi-device. Most people are on mobile devices now. I surf the web from my iPhone more than I would like to admit, and it's very frustrating when tools aren't tuned for mobile devices. And so you'll definitely want to assess the product's ability to serve up to devices. Let's talk a little bit about search. Search is an area that, in knowledge management, people spend a lot of time wringing their hands over, and I'll just give you a quick primer here so you know some of the terms, and you can make assessments about which ones are important. Keyword search is the most common type. It's basically I put in a keyword, and it will look for matching keywords in various documents. Stemming is taking that keyword and extending it and taking the different forms of that keyword. So if something, if it's applied, applying, applies, apply, are all words that will be searched if I type in any of those forms. So that broadens my search a little bit. Synonym search allows me to look for words that are adjacent to the words I'm looking for. And commonly, good knowledge management tools will have the ability to have a dictionary, or essentially a synonym dictionary, where you can define, this is our term for it, but this is what customers are likely to call it. So you have those some very industry-specific or even company-specific terms that are matched up with more generic terms. So when I search for a generic term, I might end up with what the company actually calls it. Fuzzy search allows for misspellings. So if I type in something, either a misspelling or just a misnomer, but looking for words that are close to the term I'm looking for, and recognizing that you may have mistyped or you may not have, so bringing back results for both. Wildcard is the ability to use something like an asterisk to broaden that search as well if you're looking for a piece of a word. Some tools have Boolean search and the ability to use operators like and or in the search box itself. Now, there's a couple of different schools of thought on this. Some users are very comfortable using Boolean operators, and some are not. So it's one of those things, again, you need to understand who your users are and how they search to get a good sense for which of these capabilities are going to be powerful for them. And it may be that different users use it in different ways. It could be that external users, like customers on a website, are going to use much broader, less expert search capabilities, and then your agents might choose to use Boolean operators. There's also a lot of discussion about natural language search, or NLS, you'll hear it called. It's basically the ability to parse a sentence. So when someone types in a full question to a search, to be able to understand the context of their question and return results. I'm of two minds on this as well. I think it can be powerful, but I also think that the age of Google has conditioned us to look for keywords a little more. Again, it just depends on your users. If we're talking about an older set of users who aren't as comfortable with the web, then you may choose a tool with natural language search capabilities. If it's primarily an internal help desk tool, odds are your agents are not typing in entire questions. They're just typing in a couple of words to find what they're familiar with. And lastly, you should be able to filter the result set. And as we talked a little bit about before, knowing who that customer is or knowing the type of case or knowing the context, you should be able to, whatever tool you have, should be able to limit the result set. You don't want 50 results of things that match every keyword. What you want is the 3 that are actually going to be the ones that are most helpful to an agent or a customer. talk briefly about analytics. Any good knowledge management tool should be able to provide a couple of different things. Certainly view statistics, so you understand what's being looked at. Also query statistics. What's being typed into the search? What are people asking for? And some have good capabilities like what queries are people putting in that are yielding no results? So I'm typing something in and there's no articles that match, because that can signal to you a gap in the types of knowledge that you're providing. You should be able to report on adoption by agents. For example, agents attaching knowledge articles to cases or agents viewing knowledge articles. You should understand success rates. So did a user find their answer, or did they just go away in frustration? And there's lots of different mechanisms for doing this. Some are explicit, like the user says, yes, this answered my question. Some are implicit. The customer didn't create a case, and therefore we assume they got their answer. So there's a lot of different mechanisms for doing this, and you should assess, again, knowing your users, how best to determine whether this was successful or not. You should also be able to provide feedback directly on articles. So things like ratings, 1 to 5 ratings on articles. Customers or internal users should be able to comment on articles so that you can continually improve them, or to flag them if there's a problem. Hey, this is incorrect or inaccurate. I need to make sure that this gets reviewed. And then lastly, article reporting around the status and author, the ability to understand the process, to see how many have been created, when are they created, what status are they in, how many need to be handled, who's creating them. All of those are important for managing your knowledge process. Now, there's a couple of quick features I want to talk about that you'll see. And again, you'll have to decide whether or not these are important to you. A very common one is decision trees or guided diagnostics. Some folks love these. I think they have their place. If there is a fairly complex branching problem where I need to be taken through a wizard that asks me a series of questions to get me to the other end, that's what a decision tree or guided diagnostic is useful for. But they require a lot of setup. They require a lot of maintenance. And so the problem that it solves, or the series of problems that it solves, should be enough of a pain and enough of a cost to your business to justify the effort in managing and maintaining one of these. So there are certainly cases where these are very valuable, but don't fool yourself into believing you're going to make a couple hundred of these guided resolutions. You'll make a dozen, and then the cost of managing and maintaining those may continue to be high. So just make sure you're getting an economic benefit from something like that. Tagging, the ability to tag articles may or may not be useful. It commonly allows people who interact with the database a lot, or with the knowledge base a lot, to identify things that are of use to them, if you allow what they call a folksonomy, or kind of open tagging, where end users can do it. Internal tagging can be useful as well, but the problem with tagging sometimes is a little bit unstructured, or can be unstructured depending on the tool. So make sure that whatever tagging you're interested in has some structure so that you can enforce some standards about how your knowledge is tagged. The difference between, or what I should say, semantic analysis and concept analysis, where rather than simply looking statistically at how often words show up in various documents, there are some tools that will actually do some understanding of that document, looking at the concepts and how they relate to each other. So that if I'm talking about a mouse, it understands whether I'm talking about it in the context of a computer mouse or a rodent. Right? And some tools, and this may be necessary if you have some subtleties to what you're serving, but just assess it on its own and determine whether or not that level of capability is something that's important to you. Because the flip side of that is it often requires a certain degree of, again, of management and maintenance and some initial setup that tends to be a little more complex. And lastly, search tuning and optimization. Some tools allow you to tune searches and optimize searches. Again, it depends. It's more overhead. On the other hand, it can give you more control over how search results are shown. But look at what the standard search results come back as and ask yourself if that would be appropriate for your users. Maybe your users don't need the most optimal tuning based on the cost of managing and maintaining that. And my point here is just technology is only half the equation. I'm agnostic about all of these capabilities. You need to decide as an organization whether or not they fit your organization and your users, rather than just being starstruck by all the different capabilities that are available. So let's talk a little bit about that human side of the equation. So when you're rolling out knowledge management, and I'm sure you'll hear other advice. So this is simply mine from my experience. You need to ask yourself some of these questions like, who owns the knowledge management initiative? Like, whose paycheck depends on making this successful? Because I guarantee if nobody owns your knowledge management initiative, then it's not likely to be successful. Someone needs to care enough to make sure that people are contributing knowledge, that the knowledge is being refreshed and updated, and that it's meeting targets, that, for example, some of the things we talked about before in analytics, that it's solving problems, that it's being adopted. So somebody needs to care enough. And so it's a good idea to have someone who is the acknowledged head of your knowledge management initiative. Now, is it their full-time job? It depends on on your organization, but it should be enough of a component of their job that they care about the outcome. We talked a little bit about this before. How will different channels use knowledge? How will they? How will agents use it? How will customers use it? Is it the same way, or will they need it different? Do they need different interfaces? Do they need different search capabilities? Do they need it presented to them in different ways or different categorization? So give that some thought and sit in a room and sketch out how the different user types are likely to interact with this. What is your knowledge feedback loop? What's the process to improve knowledge? So yeah, it has ratings and it has comments, but is it a weekly review cycle? Is it a monthly review cycle? Do you do it ad hoc, certainly for the first couple of months to make sure that your knowledge is rapidly iterating and improving? But what is the process for identifying articles that need to be created or improved and then getting those into the process so they get published? Another very important thing is, how do you recognize and reward contributors? Some folks fear knowledge management because it feels like they're taking what's in their brain and putting it in paper, so they become expendable. So how do you help people understand that it's making the organization better, making, for example, customer satisfaction higher, but also rewarding those people who are contributing, who are taking the information out of their brain and putting it in the knowledge articles so that other people can benefit? Analytics has a lot to do with that, so you need to be able to report on who's doing what, but also structuring programs around it, whether they be recognition programs or cash awards or whatever it might be. Think very hard about what's going to motivate your particular users who are in the business of creating knowledge. And by the same measure, the people who are actually using it. How do you encourage adoption? How do you encourage agents in your call center to make sure they consult a knowledge article before they tell the customer something that may be incorrect, particularly in something that's changing quite often? And then lastly, how will you involve the wider organization? Knowledge should not be something that's isolated only to a couple people who sit in a dark room and create knowledge articles all day. So think about what tools are available in the product that you choose, but also think about what process and what engagement will be encouraged of other people in this organization. Are they encouraged to create knowledge, or are they encouraged to participate in the process? And how do you make sure that they're bought into that as well, that they understand the value of it? I want to point something out too. There's an organization called the Consortium for Service Innovation, and they've come up with something they call Knowledge-Centered Support, or KCS. You may hear this term, KCS verified. It's actually worth investigating, and what it does is allow you to understand the deployment considerations and what is considered. They've developed this methodology that they consider to be a best practices methodology around knowledge. And there's a lot of different components to it, and I'm not going to get into all those today, but the documentation is available on the web. But what it talks about at a high level is how knowledge should be integrated with your support process, and how it should be represented at the front where someone's searching, how it should be represented to the agent, how the agent should be able to create knowledge and interact with that knowledge, how that knowledge goes through a cycle, is assessed, and then produced and republished. And so they have some very good insights into best practices around how to do that. And like any methodology, you don't have to follow what they're doing word for word, but it's good to have a look at their suggestions about what makes a successful knowledge management deployment, and then look for tools. If you feel those are good, that's a good methodology, look for tools that are KCS verified. There's a number of different knowledge management tools that adhere to and allow you to follow the principles of KCS so that your organization can follow those best practices. So that's pretty much what I had to tell you today. I'll pass it back to Ian, and you'll be able to listen to our next speaker.
Hey, Micah, thanks for that. That was fantastic. Look, I guess you'll stay with us as well for the remainder of the seminar, which would be terrific, because we have a few questions for you as well. What I'd like to do now is, thank you, Micah. What I'd like to do is pass across to Shona. Shona, are you there? And I'll get Shona to give us a quick overview of her own experience from the career post and a user perspective, which of course will be interesting as well to get that information through post Micah's little presentation. So Shona, over to you.
Right, Ian, thanks, and great to be here today. Mike has been talking about some things that just rung really true for me, and so I just wanted to talk about our experience here at Courier Post around knowledge management, because I guess the things that Mike has said about we're dealing with lots of different people, external customers, our internal users, and lots of different divisions. So it is really an important thing about thinking what's going to be appropriate for your users. And I was interested in the poll, and I guess it was a pretty 50-50 split, and I think I kind of fall in both camps in that we have lots of knowledge management tools. We have some of those diagrammatical ones that Micah mentioned. We have process documents, but how easy are they to use? And so in saying yes, we've got some, do I find them user-friendly in relation to applying them in the contact centre? So often we fall in that category. We've got too much information or no information. And I don't know about the rest of you, some of the audience, when I log onto my screen in the mornings, you know, I'm met with a whole lot of icons, I'm met with business philosophies, and overall we have to get to grips with using that different technology. And so we need to be able to train people, we need to be able to get them using it really effectively. So some of those things, as I said, in the knowledge management area is what is our business practices, what do we do about managing our intellectual property, how do we stay across those many changes to products and services, and where do we find the information we need. Most of us probably, you know, even whether it's an online little black book or whether it's the physical little black book, who are those contacts that we need to use in our day, and who best can help us if we don't know. So those things in the contact centre, when we all focus on what's our handle time and you know, what's our cost to serve customers, these things are vital to us. So why is knowledge management important? Micah mentioned it as well. The word consistency. We need to interact with our customers in a consistent manner, no matter how small or large our organisation is. And the larger it becomes, the more challenging it can be to get a consistent message. We all want to be truthful and honest in our dealings, and often there's legal obligations and problems to solve around that. One of the key things too is managing our workflow accurately. So part of that being consistent is being able to have repeatable processes, and often we rely on technology to help drive those things. So embedded often in our workflow tools is some things that are really conducive to managing knowledge. We set them up in a way that helps that capture of information and the ongoing flow to other departments throughout the process for things. So being able to manage workflow is important and may have some links to knowledge management. We need to make sure we're matching and selling the correct products and services, and you know, we need to manage our resources. One of the things that often happens in the contact centre space with technology is we get some technology, we apply the little bit that we learn and become really conversant with, but it may have a lot of other capabilities, and those are the sorts of things that a good knowledge management system can sometimes help, because often you don't know what you need to know, and how easily can you find that. And you know, some of the other things that have already been touched on around what are those communities of knowledge out there, people talking about your products and services, and I guess user groups and things like that. And you know, we're probably more familiar with that concept of wikis and things like that, where you know, may or may not be right, but people are certainly talking about our services and things. So we need to get information quickly, and again, those things touched on about, you know, what sort of systems can help gather that and bring those in to build the knowledge base. And I guess if we manage knowledge well, it just sensibly costs us less to do business. So the cost of not managing information in the contact centre space, I believe, is most importantly around the customer. That inconsistent service experience, we're frustrating to work with and hard to do business with. And, you know, we're all focusing on the customer experience, and, making the effort, reducing the effort that's needed to interact with us. So people inside the business need these tools. If we don't have them, we need more people. In our industry, we handle somewhere between 3,500 to 4,000 calls a day by our agents. Another sort of 50 to 60% are handled by our self-service queues. So any increase in talk time for me, even 10 seconds, means I need about 3 more people to answer the same number of calls if I didn't have that 10-second increase. So, the cost of people is a huge one in the contact centre industry. Recruitment's been touched on. Without a knowledge management system, how do you keep that information together? You're going to get a longer training time, you're going to have confused people, inconsistent messages throughout your training. And, when it comes to employing people, you can only employ PC literate people. You need people that are able to manage all these mixed messages and understanding. And, hey, we are only people. We can't take all of this information and regurgitate it in a consistent way. So it means the tools here are really important. And, by making the tools available, I believe people will stick around, we'll reduce attrition, people are less stressed. People who want to do a good job can get on and do it because they've got the tools at their fingertips. So for me, the cost of not having this at your fingertips is these things around people are going to cost you a lot of money. And as is touched on before, technologies are not utilised. If we don't have the knowledge around how they can best be employed, we're going to miss out. And, in the contact centre space, there's a lot of those. Workforce planning is just one of them. So, as I said, we've got some tools, and dare I say it, we've got one of those great ones that's very chart-based. It's got Swimlanes, and it's got instructions on how to use it. Because, hey, it's that complicated, you need this. And, we are lucky here in that we have more than those 150 odd processes set up in here. But that question about can everybody edit and create, who publishes it, this tool is actually one of those ones that there's a couple of people that can use it. So therefore what happens really quickly is it gets out of date and it's not dynamic. So I appreciated very much what Mike has said about some of the ways that you evaluate the tools that you could maybe apply. So, to get around some of those limitations, because this tool is very much about process and it misses out a lot of other things that in the contact centre what you need to know. So, within the business we've got subject matter experts, we've got on-phone coaches, qualified mentors, and what we need to do is help capture that information, and what better way of doing that than a dynamic knowledge management system. We have a lot of processes, and we've talked about consistency before, but all of our businesses are dynamic. Those processes change continuously. We need to adapt to new knowledge coming in, and we need to keep these updated so that the information gets to the people that needs to know. And I just encourage anybody looking at a knowledge management system to keep it simple. Workflow tools do drive consistent business practices, and it's great to have information in one place, but it's only useful if people can use them. So one of the things that we've done here at Courier Posters on our intranet, we just made our own home page, and what we've done here is just throw all of the links and all of the things that people use on a day-to-day basis into one page. And what that means is they can click here and go off to that. They can go to that process mapping that we had there. We have a branch manual which is much more word-based rather than diagrammatical, and in a good tools management system those things would be interlinked. We've got them separated, so it's a real challenge for our people. And again, while yes, I could say we have knowledge management tools, are they user-friendly? No. So sometimes I feel that we're not getting the full benefit of that. So one of the things that we've done here is also work with the other people in our organisation, because this is our homepage, which we do have control of. We encourage people to feed into this. We control the publishing of it. So we've got some of the benefits by creating this, but we've also worked with other people that really like our homepage and can come here and find that information quickly, because we're not alone in needing those sorts of, you know, the contacts and the processes around that. So for me, you know, whether you've got a large bucket of money or whether no money at all, I don't think you need to think that you can't have better managed information. This is something that we did just using our internal resources, and we've been able to put together at a very low cost. And the benefit for us here, a lot of these things are just links, so they go off to the one source of the truth. We haven't created a home page that has information that we've developed. It's actually very much based on what's going out to the rest of the business as well. But for us, it's easy to find. So in conclusion, I believe that a knowledge management system can help make people much more effective. You're going to get the real benefit out of getting them involved in knowledge management. Micah touched on, how do we reward and recognise people that are putting those inputs into there? How do we capture that dynamic nature of somebody trying to find some information, not knowing the answer, ultimately finding it, but then wanting to feed that into the knowledge management system? And you know, that happens a lot in the technical help desk space, where you know, something's broken, people go and look at the tools to try and find that information. Okay, has that fault happened before? What was the solution then? Does it apply now? Yes, no. If the answer is yes, well, they're quickly able to get on to a resolution. If the answer is no, they're still going to have to fix it, but maybe they have to develop some more information and go to some more sources. They've now ultimately got it fixed. You need to capture that in order to be able to feed that back into the knowledge management system. So hey, if that fault occurs again, you can save all of that time and effort, just go straight to the new answer. So you know, being able to keep people involved in the knowledge management process is critical, because at the end of the day, they're end users. At Courier Post, we have that great process mapping tool because somebody in our IT team thought that that would be a good tool for users. And you know, the answer is it's not really. It's actually way too complicated, and on the fly with a customer, if you don't know what you're doing, you wouldn't normally go there to get the answer. So you know, making people, keeping the people involved in the knowledge management decisions that are ultimately going to be end users is a really important thing. Organise your information in a way that's going to be relevant to the end user, and ultimately if you do that, you're going to get the best return on investment on whatever system you put in place. Great to hear the information from Micah about KCS and the methodology there, because you know, one of the things that things like this webinar do is expose us to what are some of the options out there and best practice. And you know, as I said, one of our tools came about because our IT department thought that that would be a really good thing for us to have, and you know, it needed a lot more organisational support and input to really get the best solution, and for us to get the return on investment that we put into that system. So for me, if you want to reduce cost and increase the benefit, think about managing your knowledge, whether that is just pulling together somehow the many sorts of things that you have today, or whether it's getting a system that will be able to be loaded with information, be dynamic as described. Some of, I think today I've certainly got some really good information to allow me to think again about what we need, and in that ongoing social media space, you know, it's driving us all forward to think about this again. So whether we've got a system already, is it dynamic enough to take us forward? So thank you for the opportunity today to share Courier Post's experience, and hand you back to Ian, because I know there's been some questions coming in.
Hey, Shona, that was fantastic. Thanks for that presentation. Some really good points here too. And before we move into some questions here, which I have a few in front of me, just a couple of key points that I picked up from both presentations I think are pretty important. And of course, everybody has their own objectives here, but I'm thinking that ownership is really critical here for organisations when it comes to implementation of a knowledge management system. So that's pretty key. Having somebody who takes ownership and can control and manage that and take in the resources needed. I think organisations that encourage participation is really important as well, and to get your staff to be involved in this whole build of the knowledge management platform, as well as getting your customers to participate as well is pretty critical. It must be kept up to date. Of course, that goes hand in hand with participation and ownership, of course, and it's got to be easy to use. So other things I picked up from, so fantastic presentations from you both. Right, some questions. Okay, we've got a question here from Steve. Now, where are we? Let's bring my questions up. Okay, look, we are looking to turn our, this is probably more for you, Micah, but Shona, feel free to also answer as well. We are looking to turn our fairly heavily locked down knowledge base to turn it into a wiki-style tool. What are the risks of having too many fingers in pies? That's the question.
Yeah, I'm two minds on wikis as well. I think wikis have their place, certainly in a very collaborative environment. I think where wikis are sometimes difficult is understanding the true contribution of individuals and being able to recognize them for it. So when nobody owns a document, or when everybody owns a document, nobody really owns a document. And so it's sometimes hard to encourage people through recognition to continue updating and maintaining that document. That said, for developing documents during the actual development process, a wiki is terrific because you can have multiple people providing input to it. But for kind of ongoing management of that document and making sure that 3 months, 6 months, and 9 months later it's still relevant, that's where you might want to move that document into your lockdown knowledge management system and make sure that it's going through some revisions.
Okay, thanks, Micah. Okay, again, this is probably a question which is put to both yourself and Shona, related to the training aspect or the training of staff, which you mentioned in your presentation, Micah. Is there a specific part of the knowledge management application that handles training? Like, is there a training portal that someone can go to? I guess you refer to your own Salesforce application, but potentially yours as well, Shona.
Shona, do you want to address that first, and I'll talk after?
Yeah, well, certainly I think keeping our training documents in a central place has meant that not only do we use them, we've got sales teams, we've got other customer service teams around the country. They come to that one place on our website to find our documents. So, the limitations on what we've done with our training tools is that, they're not fully searchable, but it's really still easy to find them. And for me, we don't just train in isolation in the contact centre anymore. We share that information, and those people that are training other groups are able to feed back into us, and it is that collaborative process improvement around, who's got the skill. We've got resources here because of our need that maybe they don't have in some of the other divisions of the company. So we're able to see that overseeing role, but people are raising the issues and we're developing the information and just constantly improving our training resources because of that input.
Great. From a product perspective, there's some knowledge management tools have training built in, and they'll have like what I'd consider a nascent learning management system, something that tracks that an agent has indeed read this document or has certified on one or multiple articles, so that we can be certain that they've kind of caught up to whatever the new release or the changes or policies are. That's certainly worth evaluating. It depends again on I would say the structure of your organization, and then I'd find the tool to match. If you've already got the tool in place, then you might want to augment a knowledge tool with a learning management tool, and then that can be applied more broadly through the company as well. It doesn't just have to be a point solution for the call center. It can be something that other people are using to certify on products or to certify on HR processes or other things.
Okay, yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's right. It certainly extends into the e-learning space, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, terrific. Okay, and finally, a question here. This is probably again for you, Micah, based on your knowledge of applications that you deploy. Clients that have a CRM application such as Salesforce.com, are they all utilizing the knowledge management initiative or application within that application itself? Or is it more on a case-by-case basis? And if so, how do you help them with that creation?
I'm not certain I understand the question. Is it that our knowledge management solutions usually used in combination with the CRM, or are we talking about taking data from the CRM and putting it in knowledge?
I think in combination.
Okay. Yeah. So selfishly, at Salesforce, that's kind of our mantra, is the idea that the knowledge base, an ideal knowledge base shouldn't exist in a vacuum and should be very closely tied to the information you have about the customer or the interaction. Now, that's easier said than done because there are a lot of standalone knowledge management tools, and one of the big considerations when you're picking a knowledge management tool is what will be the integration effort, either from a system or a process perspective, to whatever your current customer system is. Salesforce, we happily will sell you both, and they're tightly tied together, and you don't need to pay additional for integration. But you may have one or the other tools already in place, and so that's definitely a consideration around what type of approach you'll take. And I think you'll find that especially if you start looking at things like KCS methodology, that there are a lot of points that knowledge should be integrated into that process, and that each of those points has a cost, right? That to integrate at the customer side and integrate at the agent side and integrate on the officer side are often can add right up. So with that said, though, I would say the importance of it is paramount. I think it's very important to tie those two together, because particularly any mature knowledge base is going to have quite a bit of information in it. And what we're really trying to do, and I think Shona talked a little bit about that simplicity, keeping it simple. You're not trying to find every answer that's in your knowledge base for this question. You want to find the right answers. You want to find the correct answer or the closest answer and limit it to the fewest number possible that are likely to be correct. And so using CRM data to augment those results, or I should say to filter those results, so you end up with fewer but more targeted ones, particularly when we're talking about a large data set, it's going to be important. For a smaller data set, it's less important, and that's the kind of consideration you'll have to make.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that, Micah. Look, that's all the questions we have today, and that sort of concludes our presentation today and webinar. So I'd like to finish up quickly by thanking both Micah and Shona for their contributions today. Fantastic points there. And also to Mel Lloyd, who from Amtel here, Amtel Marketing, who put this webinar together. And finally to our audience, thank you for joining today, and I hope that we've managed to provide you with enough information to get you thinking about knowledge management if you haven't currently got it, or if you have got it, how you could probably possibly better deploy it for your own benefits. So, look, all participants will receive an email link to this presentation, and you'll notice again the contact details on the final slide for both myself, Micah, and of course Shona, and we'll respond to you directly if we need to. So that's all we have for today. Have a fantastic day, and thanks for joining us.